A new report strongly criticizes the British and French 2011 ouster of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. A conference in New York aims to make agriculture and nutrition universally available, accessible, and usable. And Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell reveals her musical finds from Sierra Leone and Liberia. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. In a new report, a group of British lawmakers are strongly criticizing the intervention by Britain and France in 2011 that led to the ouster of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The report says a lack of planning for the aftermath meant that Libya quickly descended into chaos, with rival militias battling for power and also allowing the Islamic State terror group to gain an increasing foothold in the country. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
Cheered by huge crowds, then British Prime Minister David Cameron and then French President Nicolas Sarkozy stood triumphant in Benghazi's Liberty Square in September 2011. Their joint campaign of air and missile strikes had swiftly ousted dictator Muammar Gaddafi. The Libyan leader had threatened to attack the rebel-held city of Benghazi. But the report by the British Parliament's Foreign Affairs Select Committee concluded that Britain and France had failed to identify that the threat to civilians was overstated.
The decision makers here were being presented with a blood-curdling assessment as to what was going to happen in Benghazi and therefore the need to act.
The committee said a failure from the Balkans War led to a rushed decision.
Overhanging that was the history of Srebrenica and the failure of the international community to protect the people of Srebrenica back in 1995. And it was in that climate that decisions were taken, not on the basis of a cool, calm analysis of exactly what the situation was and what the right response would be.
The report says the initial aim of protecting civilians drifted into regime change.
One of the biggest mistakes that France and the UK made during the Libyan intervention was, first of all, to refuse to establish any real dialogue, any possibility of a compromise with the Gaddafi regime. So they changed the rules of engagement from protecting civilians to overthrowing the Gaddafi regime.
The British government was also criticised for failing to understand the nature of the rebellion.
What happened afterwards was not surprising at all. When you move from a one-man strong regime to a coalition of militias and political parties and municipalities with very little cohesion and no leadership, nobody should be surprised that the country after that collapsed into chaos.
David Cameron has since defended his action, saying the military action was requested by the Arab League and approved by the United Nations Security Council. But the chaos continues. Two rival administrations, one backed by the UN based in Tripoli, the other in the eastern city of Tobruk, signed a unity government deal in December, but there's been little progress in enforcing the agreement. The lawlessness has allowed Libya to become the main gateway for migrants trying to reach Europe. Over 125,000 people have made the crossing this year alone. More than 3,000 have drowned. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, the U.S. policy on refugees has become a hot-button topic this year, thanks to a global migration crisis, fears of terrorist attacks, and a contentious presidential election. Steve Baragona reports on America's increasingly conflicted attitudes towards refugees.
Unlike these refugees headed for Western Europe, U.S.-bound asylum seekers don't just show up on American shores. To resettle in America, applicants are carefully screened and go through multiple security checks, a process that often takes up to 2 years. Mark Starella is with the State Department's Bureau of Refugees and Migrants.
The point I want to make most strongly is that refugees are the most thoroughly screened travelers to the United States of anyone coming to this country.
But that's not what most Americans hear.
And now I hear we want to take in 200,000 Syrians, right? And they could be, listen, they could be ISIS. I don't know.
Talk like that feeds American fears, but refugee advocate Lavinia Limon says it has no basis in fact. She heads one of the largest refugee resettlement agencies in the United States.
None of the 9/11 terrorists were refugees. None of the folks that have done bad things in America or Paris or any place else in the last few years have been refugees.
However, with fears of terrorist attacks atop most Americans' minds, admitting refugees from Syria and elsewhere has become a political football in this country.
Certainly, I have not seen in the last 40-something years that I've working with refugees this kind of politicization, using them really as an issue. But in the presidential campaign, that is new.
Last year, Trump was joined by fellow Republican candidates, members of Congress, and more than 24 governors in calling for a halt to admitting Syrian refugees. President Obama dismissed those calls, and in response to criticism that the U.S. wasn't doing enough to ease the global migration crisis, ordered his administration to ramp up the number of refugee admissions to the U.S. to 85,000 this year. And next year, the administration said this week, it will admit 110,000 refugees, the largest number in 2 decades. For VOA correspondent Masoud Farivar, I'm Steve Baragona.
Now, we always want to know what you think about issues that affect your daily life, including the global migration crisis and how it is affecting Africa. We've asked a question, and now we want to profile your answers. This week we asked, what are the causes of the big migrant movement from Africa towards Europe, and what can be done to quell this exodus from the continent? Well, Dino Barre says, I'm one of the victims who crossed the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. I'm in Italy now. The reason is simple. No hope for the future, lack of good medical care, education, hunger, poverty, insecurity, and corrupt leaders. No hope for the future, says, lack of good medical care, education, hunger, poverty, insecurity, and corrupt leaders. Now, here's another one. Most of you cited similar reasons for this massive movement towards Europe. Sonika Katela is from Lusaka in Zambia, says, if war stops and good-paying jobs are created, even if the economy is not good, people won't leave. Right? And Borhan Abdelkadir from Galkayo in Somalia also agrees and says African leaders are not creating progress in their countries. They're just busy trying to keep their positions forever. And Mark Morris from Tokoradi in Ghana says, a place of peace is what we seek. And that phrase actually sums up the plight of a lot of African migrants. Now, for more on the African migrant exodus, I'm joined by my colleagues, Salam Solomon and Jackson Mvunganya. Welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent.
This is something we're really passionate about.
Absolutely.
So first, just what are your thoughts on, let me start with Salam, on what our viewers have said?
You know, some of the viewers, most of the viewers actually pointed to war. The last comment that you saw is, lack of peace, lack of opportunities, educational opportunities, economic incentives in these countries. And so what we are seeing from early days in 2013, 2014, what we're seeing is a trend that this migration problem is going to grow, not decrease.
It's not decreasing. And we know that when you talk about all those issues, these are things that governments must produce, must provide, at least a great number of this, including structures and infrastructures that can enable people to survive.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Vincent.
Right?
There's a bit of a leadership crisis on many parts of the continent where these people are leaving, are running away from.
Yeah.
When we look at South Sudan, numbers are in the show over 1 million people left South Sudan because of the war that broke out over 2 years ago, the youngest country in the world. So there's a need for self-reflection by the leadership on the continent, by the African Union. What do we need to do to correct some of the things that are happening in our countries so that we curtail some of the movement of the people that are leaving our countries?
And regardless of what the leadership of the African Union says, we know that we haven't really heard any consistent, continuing conversation about how to stop this. Now, I thought I liked really a lot what Soneka from Zambia says, that even if the economy is bad, if there was peace and leaders were working hard to create opportunities, people will stay. And it reminded me in South Sudan, for example, people went back in when they had the belief and hope that it's going to be peace.
Right.
They didn't care that the country was very poor. So what does that make you say? Think about this.
I mean, there is, there's a big African diaspora. Sometimes, if you hear the conversation amongst Africa diaspora, you see there's like need to go back and contribute to their countries. But what's lingering in these issues is that African, transparency, governance issues. It always revolves around governance issues. When you're talking about lack of employment or unemployment or struggling, people struggling to get jobs and looking for greener pastures outside. You're talking about governance issues at the end of the day. And so it's all about taking the accountability in these African leaders. 50-plus countries in Africa right now are still having the same leaders that they've had for 30, 20, how many years. And so these are issues that need to be addressed. Governance issues are at the heart, at the core of these issues. And accountability is very important in this subject.
And, Jackson, when we talk about leadership, one of the things that, for me at least, drives me nuts is that if you talk to all leaders, and we've interviewed quite a bunch of them, they'll tell you everything is okay. They are very, very satisfied with
it's okay
what's
for them
happening
because
in the
if they fall sick, they can take a private jet to Europe for medical treatment, right? The people can't afford those same luxuries. But let's stop framing this and talking about analysts who talk about this issue, framing it as if it's entirely an economic issue, like these people are running away from the continent because it's poor. No, it's not. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of potential, people see it, but they just don't have the right environment to prosper.
It's like correct. The environment has been kind of set in a way that it's conspiring against individual efforts to survive.
That's true.
And you see this across the continent. But we know that many young people have actually tried hard. Some have made it, but what are some of the obstacles that people have to face, say, from Eritrea, even Ethiopia, where you're very familiar with?
Within those countries?
Yes.
I mean, we talked about, unemployment being used by many governments as the factor that drives people out. But, if conducive environments are available for, opportunities for young people to get jobs and things like that, this wouldn't be an issue. But also think about, having a system that's not, democratic systems, for instance. Lack of democratic systems affects a lot of African countries.
You live in fear.
You live in fear, and you're persecuted. There are wars and unstable situations in some places. Security issues are also, extremism and security issues are important to think about sometimes, because if families don't find stable conditions to live a simple life, they're not...
Vincent, you come from Kenya, right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. How many Kenyans, for example, when you look at the numbers of people who have been rescued from these violent waters that, these terrible journeys that they have to take, how many Kenyans have you seen?
No, I have not seen any.
Exactly, because Kenya has enjoyed relative peace over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, so with peace, with a level of stability, people are resilient enough to struggle even in the face of really terrible
They feel like they have a fighting chance.
But there is a question that we want to end with, perhaps. Will this end by African leaders burying their heads in the sand? Will this migration stop tomorrow, just like that?
I would say, I don't want to sound pessimistic about this, but I've seen most of African leaders are blaming things on international community to take action, and we've seen money coming from European Union to countries like the Sudan, and you see all these reactions. But I don't think, unless African leadership takes responsibility, and unless people who are fleeing are going to be actively participating in the political process of their own countries, it will continue.
Jackson.
Absolutely, I agree with what you said, and we were having a conversation earlier today. For them to be able to tackle this issue head on would mean ultimately also it risks their jeopardizes their existence in power.
It's like they have to stand in front of a mirror and look at their own faults and acknowledge them, but then denial is like the ongoing game, but no amount
denial
of
sustains them in power.
but no amount of that will stop this
deflect,
crisis.
Deflect.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the key is that people want to see these leaders engaging in this, being honest, being patriotic enough, loving their people enough to make whatever sacrifices to make life livable on the continent.
Absolutely.
You know, it's been nice hosting you once again.
Thank you.
And, thanks to both Jackson and Solomon for coming. Now, my conversation with Salem and Jackson will continue today on Africa 54 Facebook page, 30 minutes after the show, or 17:30 UTC. So please join us. Go to Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and tell me what you think, or send me a tweet at VOA Vince Makori. Well, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, using the data revolution to solve the malnutrition crisis. Stay with us.
My name's Carla Babb, and I work the Pentagon beat. That access helps me to do better stories. Every day it's my responsibility to collect all of the defense news. It keeps our VOA viewers informed. I get to travel all across the globe. Anything that's defense related and how to protect and keep people safe, that's where I'll go. So it's never a dull moment at the Pentagon. My name is Carla Babb. This is my beat.
Well, the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition, or GODAN, is holding the first ever global conference in New York on Friday to discuss the role of open data for agriculture and nutrition. Academics, researchers, and open data practitioners are discussing their latest findings and exploring ways to collaborate in opening up the data needed to alleviate the problems in both agriculture and related nutritional areas. Experts say many people are currently unaware of the potential of open data and how to use it to overcome the world's major challenges, especially in agriculture and nutrition. Well, in business news, stocks opened lower on the U.S. exchanges following a volatile week of trade. Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrina joins us from NASDAQ in New York with a review of the markets and the latest business headlines in Africa this week.
Good afternoon from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. U.S. stocks open fractionally down. We can see the S&P and the Dow down about 0.5%. The NASDAQ relatively outperforming, only down 0.3%. Not really a surprise considering the uptrend that we saw yesterday. We're trading lower on a higher dollar and oil turning down a bit. Let's turn to what made financial headlines on the continent this week. Visa has launched its M-Visa app that allows users to make purchases or transfer money on their cell phones in Kenya. Visa is in talks to roll out the product in Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda within 2 months and expects to have the first Nigerian bank signed up by the end of 2016. It's also in talks with South Africa. Mobile money services that allow customers to transfer funds using their phones have proved hugely popular in some parts of Africa, particularly where people have less access to traditional bank accounts. Now, this is interesting because in South Africa, mobile phone operator MTN Group has pulled the plug on its local mobile money business, saying it was not viable in a country where around 3/4 of the population already have a bank account. The annual inflation rate in Nigeria accelerated to 17.6% in August. That's up from 17.1% in July. That's according to the Statistics Office. Nigeria expects to raise $1 billion US from Eurobonds by mid-December, a senior debt official said. All borrowing is going to fund capital projects, which we all know infrastructure is really important to getting Nigeria back on its feet. Next week is going to be a real important one for African trade and business with the Africa Investor Conference on Monday at the NASDAQ market site. And Bloomberg Philanthropies and the U.S. Department of Commerce, they are going to co-host the second 2016 U.S. Africa Business Forum at the UN on Wednesday. Both events will focus on trade and investment opportunities in Africa with heads of government and business leaders in attendance. Be sure to check out the NASDAQ's Facebook Live page on Monday. I'm going to be exclusively hosting African and U.S. leaders in business and investment as we go throughout the day with the Africa Investor Conference here. From the NASDAQ market site in Times Square, I'm Jill Malandrino for Africa 54.
Thanks a lot, Jill, and we look forward to those interviews. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Hot, new West African music finds. We'll be right back and tell you about it.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Madagascar, nearly 1.2 million people are now food insecure due to the El Niño weather phenomenon that has induced the third year of drought. In Somalia, aid agencies estimate that at least 300,000 children in the country are acutely malnourished, while 55,000 are severely malnourished. In South Sudan, the UN Human Rights Commission says that a lack of accountability in the country has seen human rights violations and abuses continue. In Senegal, a community of young women are using coding and entrepreneurial skills to enter a booming mobile technology movement. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Haydee Adams-Fitzpatrick. Let's take a look at what's trending. It looks like there's another step forward in the robot revolution. And could this be the nursing assistant of the future? A service droid developed in Korea is helping healthcare workers spend more time with their patients. The robot relieves them of menial tasks like delivering meals and transporting dirty dishes. The developers say that Go-Kart is a cost-effective solution for cash-strapped institutions because it substitutes human labor and is willing to work around the clock. The smaller version can not only maneuver down narrow corridors, it can also sneak between people using 3D sensors and laser scanners to detect obstacles and plan alternative routes. And who can compete with that? Researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Georgia Tech have figured out a way to read the pages of a book without actually opening it. Here's how it works. The device directs ultra-short bursts of radiation at stacks of paper. Some of it is absorbed by the paper, but the remainder is reflected back. The signals that bounce back are then analyzed using computer algorithms which can discern individual letters. Researchers say the system could someday be used by museums to scan the contents of old books too fragile to handle, or to examine paintings to confirm their authenticity and even understand the artist's creative process. Should also be good news for the less studious student. And finally, mooncakes are a tasty tradition reserved for the Chinese Mid-Autumn Festival, oozing with sugar, rich fillings and loads of calories. But now, as people in this part of the world battle rising levels of obesity, these treats are getting a healthy makeover. There's a vegan alternative too, of course, made with coconut milk and sesame seeds. Upscale bakeries are now borrowing from the traditional Western cupcake to create interesting new flavors. So your comfort food still looks the same. We cannot vouch for the taste. And that's what is trending today. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, it's time for our Music Makers segment, and today I'm joined by Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell, who recently returned from a trip to West Africa where she interacted with numerous musicians. Heather, welcome back to Africa 54. It's been a long time.
It has been too long, Vincent.
All right, and I see you, showing off your T-shirt from Liberia.
Yes.
Welcome, and share with us your experience there. Who did you meet, and what was the trip all about?
Well, the trip was great. It was amazing. It was all about, on my side, investigating the role of music in Ebola during the active period and then now post-Ebola. But I also discovered that music had a big impact on Ebola in terms of educating people, making people realize, believing that it was real. That was a big problem in the beginning.
And some of those guys were really creative. They did this within a short time. Like, they really rose up to the occasion?
They really rose up to the occasion. I spoke with maybe 6 musicians in Liberia and about the same in Sierra Leone. And they all said that it was just this feeling that they were compelled to do something, and being musicians, that's, you know,
I mean,
that's
part
what they
of the
would
society that was also a service to society's, you know, survival. Everybody had to survive.
Yes.
You know what? Let's. You met one guy, a very interesting guy.
Yeah.
First, the name is Teddy Ride.
Yeah, and it's not Teddy Ride, it's Teddy Ra.
Teddy Ride.
Because that's how you say it in Liberia.
Oh, Teddy Ride.
Teddy Ride.
Okay. How about we just, you know, listen to what is the music he plays?
It's called Hipco. Hipco is hip for hip hop and ko for Kolokwa, which is the way that people speak English in Liberia.
So Liberian
Hipco is
hip-hop.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, right. Now, Teddy Ride.
Yeah, Teddy
Let's
Ride.
listen to the man. Oh. I listened to some more of his music on YouTube. He's really good.
He's really good.
Yeah. Now, I know you came back with quite a lot of stuff. Share with us what we might expect in the coming days, coming weeks.
Well, you'll expect some more stuff like what we just saw, and that was a live performance by Teddy at the town hall meeting that VOA held there in Liberia. Yeah. There are also a few musicians from Sierra Leone that we interviewed. So I have some music clips, some videos of music about Ebola, but also interviews and all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's weeks and weeks of material I'm still working through. I will say that the blog post, I just made a blog post that features Teddy Ra and some others, and the radio show. You can listen to the radio feature. Each week I'm doing a little bit. Yeah.
That's great. We look forward to that, and I know that in Liberia and Salo, they listen to us quite a lot. They watch our programs. We really appreciate them too.
Yes.
And so it's good to feature them on our program. Heather, as always, thanks a lot for joining us and bringing us good things.
Thanks, Vincent.
We want to thank Heather for yet, of course, another Music Maker segment. It's great. Now, to learn more about Heather herself, go to her VOA radio show, and her VOA radio show. Want to visit Facebook and type in the keywords Music Time in Africa, and then you can see what time our program can be heard in your area and get more information about some of our featured artists. And that's our show for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words, where we teach you about words in the news.
When you hear the word consensus in a news story, what does it mean? Consensus.
The authors came to a consensus. No region is left untouched, says climate analyst Kelly Levin of the World Resources Institute, speaking to us by Skype.
Consensus means to agree or to share the same opinion about something.
In our story, the authors agreed on the same information. The scientists reached a consensus, or agreed, that climate change is a major problem.
Now, when you hear the word consensus, your American English will be good enough to use it in a conversation.